Northbound from the Stevenson to Jackson. Northbound tri-state delays are 111th to 47th from the Reagan Tollway towards southbound 120 Deerfield, the Adams Tollway to Irving Park. Southbound 53 is gummed up. Randy Kirchhoff. I'm Jim Telemonte on AM 560 The Answer.
Chicago's Morning Answer continues next. Your official Chicagoland weather forecast from the 1 Hour Heating and Air Conditioning Weather Center and our meteorologist, Steve Williams.
Partly sunny today, the high 42. Clouds and cold tonight, low 29. A morning rain or snow shower in spots tomorrow, otherwise cloudy, high 46. Morning snow showers on Thursday with a high at 34. I'm Steve Williams on AM 560, The Answer.
34 at O'Hare, 36 Lakefront. Next news, 8:30. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
Don't miss the ammo event this weekend at Shoot Point Blank. Pick up great deals on ammo, like 50 rounds of 9mm as low as $10.99 per box. The more ammo you buy, the more you save. Load up this weekend at Shoot Point Blank's ammo event. See store for details.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560. The Answer.
Good morning, Dan and Amy. The secret to success and happiness in a single word. You know what that word is, Amy?
Marriage.
Okay. That's sure for some. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Because you know what? You marry my best friend.
Yeah.
Today I married my best friend.
That's one answer.
Goofy.
Another is nunchi. Very interesting piece from Uni Hong in New York Times. The Korean secret to happiness and success, nunchi, literally translated I measure. Nunchi is the art of sensing what people are thinking and feeling and responding appropriately. And in Korea, it is woven into everyday life as children are raised. Really good piece. And the best part of this from Ms. Hong is her comparison to English words that approximated sort of in top line meaning, but not in terms of substance. She writes, the English language has terms that are vaguely related to nunchi, like empathy and emotional intelligence. But the road to hell is paved with empathy, paraphrasing Samuel Johnson there. In the West, for some reason, empathy holds a kingly position among the virtues. Empathy might be what sets you apart from sociopaths, but it cannot protect you from sociopaths. In fact, she writes, excessive empathy can be dangerous. Narcissists are known for targeting empathetic people. It's great to put yourself in another's shoes, but the logical extension may be that you lose yourself. It's destabilizing. By contrast, nunchi puts quiet observation first, which allows you to stay on firm ground while listening to the other person. It's extraordinarily suited for modern life, even though it dates back to the origins of the Korean civilization, because it requires speed and adaptability. All you need are your eyes and your ears. The hardest part, a quiet mind. Really interesting piece. And she talks about how difficult it was and how she employed this sort of the cultural norm of nunchi when she was 12 years old. Her parents decided to move back to South Korea. She knew no Korean. She was placed in a Korean school. I had no lever to pull except to watch what the other children were doing. A Korean education is a nunchi education. In my day, students were not allowed to ask questions during class. Teachers gave students intentionally vague information about everything from what school supplies to bring to where exams were taking place. Working out these mysteries on your own by using your nunchi was part of your education. Within a year, I was at the top of my class. Within 18 months, I was class vice president. All this despite the fact that my Korean was still pretty bad. My success was all down to my forcibly honed nunchi. She should be like a life coach, starting with the occupants of this studio. But anyway, it's a perfect segue to our next guest. She is Lionel Shriver. She's a columnist for The Guardian, contributor to New York Times and Spectator USA, and also, you probably saw this movie if you didn't read the book. she's the author of We Need to Talk About Kevin. Remember that movie? It was Tilda Swinton and John C. Reilly.
Oh.
I did not read the book, I'm ashamed to say, but I did see the movie, and the adaptation was good. It was a good movie. It's really worth checking out, and frankly, it's a little bit dark, but it has a lot of timeliness for some of the cultural challenges in America with kids who commit unspeakable acts of violence, frankly. But anyway, Lionel Shriver, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
So you wrote a piece about Asian Americans, and this was against the backdrop of the
Students for Fair Admission.
yeah, the
suit
Harvard
against
University
Harvard, yeah.
admissions case where the Asian students who were being discriminated against for doing too well on the entrance exam strictures lost that case. And you point out that Asians are doing so well that they must be stopped at all costs.
Absolutely. It's an interesting case, partly because it illustrates how this fixing discrimination with more discrimination doesn't work, and gets you into a really weird area. I don't think you could argue, for example, that Asians have not suffered historical discrimination in the United States. They used to be treated atrociously. And we even passed legislation in the late 1880s specifically excluding them from immigrating to and working in the United States.
Right.
And I think you could also argue that we've got some discrimination in the present just because we're so paranoid about China taking over the world. So the fact that Asians are doing so well despite this makes the advocates of affirmative action look bad, because it shouldn't be possible. They should be suffering. They should be behind in the classes, and instead they're actually outpacing white students who we are told incessantly are so privileged. So it's also an ugly story of these admissions offices scheming to suppress the numbers of Asians who would otherwise be admitted because they have all these perfect test scores, by giving them low marks on personality and character, like qualities like leadership. Plays to the stereotype of Asians as passive and pliant.
Well, and the perfect juxtaposition, right? The varsity blues scandal, places like USC, gaming the system, trying to buy your way in. The people are going to prison for doing that. But at Harvard, rigging the test scores against Asian students to not allow them in is just being enlightened and trying to get more diversity on campus.
Well, it's almost as if Asians don't count as minorities anymore.
Oh, yeah.
They're doing too well, so they don't get treated like blacks and Hispanics.
Well, tell me about this personal ratings that they go through. That it's a subjective assessment of their character traits as leadership, such as leadership.
Well, the weird thing about that rating system is that it's so arbitrary, and it gives the people who are doing the rating a huge amount of power, and it's based on very little information. Often these ratings have been given without the benefit of doing an interview, which I find astonishing.
It's also interesting, too, because it was only a few years ago, and you sort of referenced this in your piece in The Spectator, where there was this Tiger Mom phenomenon, and you had, I think was her name, Emily Chu, wrote a book about it, a best-selling book about it, and it was being sort of debated, and, is this the best model for American students? Are there lessons at least take away from some of the cultural differences between some Asian families and American families in terms of the education of children and so forth? And now that's sort of being shunted aside.
Well, I think you can do a critique of the kind of upbringing of children that a lot of Asian communities have embraced. It puts kids under a huge amount of pressure to perform. It's constantly making them think ahead rather than live in the moment and have a real childhood. I don't especially envy these children. I think that they're really pushed by their parents to perform, and they're not supposed to do anything for fun. And I don't think that's a great model for childhood. And there's been some evidence that once there's generational turnover, this tiger mom effect starts to ebb.
But right.
And I think that's probably a good thing. But what I would say is that if you've got a whole cohort of children who have made all these sacrifices, and not been out on the town and drinking with their friends in high school, but working late into the night on learning their English vocabulary and doing their calculus homework. I mean, they should at least reap the benefit of that effort, right?
Yeah, right.
And instead, we're discriminating against them and saying, well, okay, well, you jumped through all the hoops that we had put in front of you, and you successfully got through every single one of them, but that's not good enough because it doesn't suit our template, our racial template. And, this is racism, and I don't know what else to call it.
Yeah,
do you think
it's not
eventually,
fair.
Yeah, and
I
they've
think that's
appealed.
right.
So do you think they'll eventually end up in the Supreme Court? Because that would be
I do.
astonishing.
I think most people do. And the Supreme Court has been dodging making a decisive ruling on affirmative action for a long time.
Yeah.
It has more or less ruled out the use of quotas, but that's what Harvard and all the other Ivies, all the other elite institutions are using de facto quotas.
Absolutely.
If you take a look at the statistics on their admissions year after year, they are constantly coming up with the same percentage of blacks and Hispanics from year to year, and the same percentage of Asians, because, and that's despite the fact that they're getting fluctuating percentages in applications.
Yeah.
So that is using a quota system.
There's no question. It's quoted by another name, and you're referencing. I think you're referencing the Bollinger cases in the Supreme Court from about 15 years ago, and famously in the dicta, I think it was Sandra Day O'Connor said, maybe 20 years from now, maybe 25 years from now, we'll revisit this and we'll decide that allowing race to be used at all is illegitimate. Well, we're about at that timeline now, so hopefully this case does make it to the court and Bollinger is reexamined.
I hope so. Because we've been
go
doing affirmative action in education for 50 years, and at no point does anyone say enough is enough. We've compensated. Let's go back to just being fair to everyone. It's never over.
Yeah, and I want to go back.
And I think we need court intervention because it shouldn't be constitutional.
I want to go back to something you were mentioning too. Just it was reminiscent of this documentary from about 10 years ago called 2 Million Minutes, and it looked at an American kid. I think she was in Indiana. To the 2 million minutes she spends in high school compared to the 2 million minutes of a kid in India compared to the 2 million minutes of a kid in China. And there were a lot of differences, as you're sort of pointing out, with sort of the tiger mom model versus other models. But I think that's really important. You don't have to embrace the tiger mom model. You don't have to embrace the American model, which is, be in as many extracurricular activities as you can, be a generalist, and be a generalist when it comes to your education, too. You don't have to embrace that model. There are different models and different trade-offs and different paths for different kids. But the idea that you choose this one path saying if you do these things, then you can expect to derive these benefits, and then those benefits are taken away because, as you said, you don't fit the outcome that we desire demographically. Well, that's just a rigged system, and that's unfair, and that fundamentally runs at odds with, American sense of fair play, just like the Varsity Blues scandal does.
Absolutely. And, you look at California, which used to use affirmative action in education, and then by referendum that was overturned, and they are not legally allowed to consider race in college admissions. So look what happened. I mean, 40% of the state schools, some of which are very elite institutions, are now Asian.
Yeah, right.
And I think, like, well, more power to them. Congratulations. You worked really hard, and you're being given what you deserve. And that's despite something like the state overall is, I think, something like 6% Asian. So it's obviously wildly disproportionate. But that's the American system, or it should be, because those are the people who made the scores, did the work, and deserve to get in.
She is Lionel Shriver. She's a columnist for The Guardian, contributor to The New York Times, and Spectator USA, author of the book that was optioned into a movie. It was very good. We Need to Talk About Kevin, and check out her column at Spectator USA, which I'll tweet out. Asians are doing too well. They must be stopped, tongue-in-cheek. Lionel Shriver, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Oh, I really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you.
And she joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
There's only one radio show in Chicago talking about today's biggest stories and telling you what they really mean. That show is this one, Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.
If you have pain, listen up. Dennis Prager here. You don't need to live in pain. Let me repeat that. You don't have to live in pain. Chronic pain is the worst, whether it's from an accident or pain that just develops. So, Chicagoland, you're in luck. Dr. Ken Candido is one of the nation's most respected and successful pain doctors. He's been voted one of Chicago's best pain doctors several times. Bottom line, he's the pain doctor you need. Dr. Candido of Chicago Anesthesia and Pain Specialists will help you get